Well, good morning. I'm Karen Sims Gallagher. I'm Dean of the USC Rossier School of Education, and I am delighted to welcome you today to the 41st Pullias Lecture. I'd like to recognize some special guests who have joined us today. First of all, former LA Mayor Richard Reardon and his wife Elizabeth here. USC Provost Michael Quick. Former Rossier Dean Gib Henschke and his wife Peggy over here. From Rossier's Board of Counselors, Frank Baxter. Michelle Siqueiros, past member of the USC Pullias Lecture Advisory Board. Michelle? And some of Bill's family are here. So first of all, his brother Paul Tierney, his wife Susan, over here. And then his brother Peter Tierney with his wife Carol and their son Gavin. So welcome to all of you. The Pullias Lecture was conceived in 1978 as a tribute to Earl V. Pullias, who joined the School of Education in 1957 after many years as Dean of Faculty at Pepperdine University. His charge at USC was to develop a major in higher education, and by 1961, the school awarded the first of many doctorates in the field. When the Department of Higher Education was created in 1968, Dr. Pullias was named chair. Dr. Pullias was revered by his colleagues and students and was a prolific scholar known for his philosophical writings on teaching and learning at the college level. He also believed that no institution has a greater opportunity to contribute to the upward movement of society than higher education. The work of the Pullias Center certainly embraces that vision. It strives to improve college outcomes for underserved students through research and direct engagement with policymakers and institutional leaders on such critical issues as access, retention, and accountability. Pullias scholars are driven by the same values that form the core of USC Rossier's mission: to prepare leaders to achieve educational equity through practice, research, and policy. So, for example, what do gang-affiliated students in alternative schools know about college affordability and financial aid? Is there a gender gap in community colleges vis-a-vis persistence in STEM fields? And what role can technology play in developing a college-going culture in Title I schools? These are but a few of the questions our faculty have been examining in an effort to promote that upward movement that Dr. Pullias spoke of. The Pullias Lecture also reflects that vision. It brings nationally recognized scholars and leaders to our campus to promote and provoke academic dialogue on important topics in post-secondary education. Past speakers have included university presidents, heads of major foundations, and a U.S. Secretary of Education. This year's Pullias Lecturer is an exceptional scholar, known for his incisive and eloquent work in areas including higher ed governance, access, and equity. Dr. William G. Tierney founded and co-directs the research center that was renamed the USC Pullias Center for Higher Education in 2012, following a generous bequest from the Pullias family estate. Bill Tierney's impact during his 25 years at USC Rossier is immeasurable. He has helped draw many of the field's top researchers to our faculty, and he led the Pullias Center, the only one of its kind in a research school of education, to national and international prominence. You will hear more about Bill and his contributions to education from many others here today, beginning with our provost. Dr. Michael Quick is our provost and senior vice president for academic affairs at the University of Southern California, and the holder of the Shelley and Ofer Nemirovsky Provost Chair. He is also a professor of biological sciences in the Dorn Seif College of Letters, Arts, and Sciences, As the university's second-ranking academic administrator, he oversees Dornsife College, the Keck School of Medicine, and 17 other professional schools. In addition to USC's museums and the divisions of student affairs, libraries, research, and enrollment services. He received his PhD in neuroscience from Emory University. Please help me welcome to the podium Provost Michael Quick.
Oh, thank you all. It's great to see you here. Thanks for inviting me to the wake. But it is a real honor to be here, and Adriana, thank you for inviting me. I can't think of anything else I would rather do than get a chance to be up here for a few minutes in honor of Bill Tierney and his amazing career. And it's such a tremendous honor that he gets to give the Pullias Lecture this year and talk about topics that really have occupied his mind for such a large number of years. And I'm so honored to get to thank Bill for everything he's done internationally in his own scholarship, nationally, of course, and also right here in his own front yard, the work he has done on our campus to make this university better. We are a product of our life experiences, no doubt about it, and I think it's telling that Bill's own experience of higher education took him from Tufts to Harvard to Stanford, but more importantly, from the disciplines of English to education to anthropology to administration and policy analysis. And that path has certainly and is clearly evident in the work that he's done throughout his career. Just by seeing the breadth of his scholarly work, one can tell that he brought to bear so many different disciplines that he was associated with throughout his life. Bill has been a terrific friend and mentor of mine, usually over a glass or two of wine, more like bottles lately. I'm not sure, though, we ever had a chance to talk about, to be honest, the fact that we're both Peace Corps volunteers. Bill did amazing work in the Peace Corps, and I had the opportunity to serve as a volunteer for a number of years. And so I know that he knows that the incredible impact that these experiences have. And I think a lot of us who go into the Peace Corps think we're actually going to go out and change people's lives, and what we really end up finding out is the life we changed was our own through the amazing relationships that we created while in the Peace Corps. And that what you end up learning is that by giving, you get so much back. And I think that's such an amazing idea and concept that justifies and signifies Bill's contribution. That giving of oneself has been true to what Bill has always stood for when he was a member of the faculty at Penn State and since 1994 here at USC. Many of us in this room are the product of him giving. In addition to nurturing so many graduate students and junior faculty and an occasional provost or two, Bill has also nurtured this university over the quarter century that he's been here. He's always stepped up when asked to serve, and probably many times he stepped up even when not asked to serve. Whether helping to lead the Pullias Center, helping lead the Rossier School of Education, or being the president of the Academic Senate, or the chair of the University Committee on Academic Review, this list goes on and on of Bill's contributions. But to me, the most important thing that Bill has given the university is his critique. To call bullshit when he sees it. That is the Bill Tierney I know. To demand more of all of us. And what I value about Bill more than anything is that his critiques have always come from a place of love for USC and for higher education in general. He has always reminded us that we must all give back to our university and to higher education. It's living up to our great and highest ideals, and Bill has always held us to those high standards. So I want to thank Bill for his amazing contributions and to let him know that as soon as I get back to my office, I am shredding any retirement documents I see. He has been amazing, and Bill, thank you for a quarter century of tremendous service to this university and to the greater good of higher education and all that it stands for. Thank you so very much. Now it is my great pleasure to invite up to the podium Professor Estella Ben-Simon. She's the director of our center. Don't walk too fast, Estella. She is the director of our Center for Urban Education, which she founded in 1999. Since its founding, the center has worked with thousands of higher education professionals, from presidents to faculty to academic counselors, helping them take steps in their daily work to reverse the impact of the historical and structural disadvantages that prevent many students of color from excelling in higher education. Ladies and gentlemen, Professor Ben-Simon. Nice to see you. Thanks for doing this.
William G. Tierney is a highly decorated academic rebel and self-described outlaw, as you can see in the title of this book, that will serve as the anchor for this introduction. There are many additional ways in which he can be described, as you can see in the word cloud I have prepared, especially for him. I claim sole authorship. Some of you, particularly those of you who have succumbed to universititis, may be asking yourselves, how is it possible that an academic nonconformist such as Bill be the recipient of every single honor that USC reserves for its most brilliant, creative, and accomplished faculty? I know to some it may sound like I'm exaggerating, so just in case you're not aware of the honors he has earned, I will list them briefly. He is a university professor, a designation that is bestowed on faculty based on significant accomplishments in several disciplines. There are just 27 professors who have the title of university professor, and Bill is the only and first professor from the Rossier School of Education to hold this prestigious title. He is the first professor to hold the title of Wilbur Kiefer Professor of Higher Education. He is the first higher education scholar and also the only out gay academic to be elected president of the American Educational Research Association. He has served as president of USC's Academic Senate, and he has received just about all the awards given by the Association for the Study of Higher Education, of which he was also president. He has received not one, not two, but 3 Fulbrights, which is quite unprecedented. He is an elected member of the National Academy of Education and a fellow in the American Education Research Association. Bill's CV is 69 pages long, and it only lists his most significant accomplishments. I have seen it, and it is definitely not 69 pages of frivolous feelings, though maybe some. Bill is a superb mentor. As I was agonizing, and I was really agonizing, this is probably one of the hardest things that I've done, over writing his introduction, I received a gift from the Johns Hopkins University Press, Gina Garcia's new book on Hispanic serving institutions. Leafing through it, I came across Bill's name in the acknowledgments. And I want to share with you what she says there, because it is the best way that I can represent what it means to be mentored by Bill. Gina tells us that while she was a visiting scholar at USC, she met Dr. Tierney. Listen to this. This is typical Bill. She goes on to say that within the first 10 minutes of their conversation, he asked her, and I wish I could imitate Bill's, tone. So do you want to write a book? And she said, yes, she wanted to write a book. But I had no idea of what she says, I had no idea of what she was saying or that Bill was serious. The book is now done. It just came out about last week, I think. And she gives credit to Bill for making her book happen and for it getting published by Johns Hopkins as part of the series that he and Laura Perna co-edit. Bill is a giant in the field of education, and he's mostly known for his books, articles, burning and spicy op-eds, essays, and blogs. But many of his admirers may not be aware that he started a program at USC called Summertime that has supported over 2,000 first-generation college students as they transition to college by offering intensive writing and college knowledge workshops. He also started the I Am Mentoring program, which pairs USC faculty, staff, and graduate students as mentors with local high school students. Over the years, they have assisted hundreds of students in applying to college and for financial aid. Through this program, Bill has also been a mentor to many students who have gone on to college, and maybe some of them are here today. Bill is a very powerful man, very powerful. He can make things happen. He could hoard his power. He could hoard his time, but he does not. Mentorship is much more than just caring. Mentorship that has consequences and is transformative is the use of one's power to enable the success and happiness of others. Bill uses his power for the good of others. Bill is also, as many of you I'm sure know here, a dedicated maker of lists. As an example of the kind of lists Bill makes, take a moment with me and imagine Bill handing you a list and saying, "Here, go and do this." The list would not be very long, and I will help you imagine now what it might include. It will say things like, first, develop a morning routine. And his is to get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, maybe earlier, and read for a couple of hours. Not just read higher education stuff, but read The Nation, The New Yorker, the New York Review of Books, or newly published books about history, politics, and cultural studies. Number 2, write every day. The goal should be at least 5 pages. I'm sure that many of his doctoral students here heard that. Number 3, if you're going to a conference, reach out to at least 5 other participants who you want to learn about you, and you want to learn about them. 4, exercise every single day. Bill is a marathon runner, and he and Barry are avid hikers. And 5, above all, don't hide who you are. Speak out and stand up for what is right. Bill was a young and just tenured professor at Penn State University when I and our beloved friend Bobby Wright arrived there in 1989 as assistant professors. At that point, Bill had already developed a national reputation as a critical social analyst dedicated to the disrupting of sacred theories of student success and functionalist theories of academic management and leadership. That year, 1989, was also the year that Bill became a public warrior. He decided to take on the very white and conservative leadership of Penn State University and its Board of Trustees. He mobilized and orchestrated a campaign to include sexual orientation as a protected group in the obligatory non-discrimination clause that typically appears in university official documents. Bill learned the tactics of how to be an academic change agent through the process of organizing the movement to get Penn State's Board of Trustees to accept the sexual orientation clause. But the thing about Bill is that his purpose was not to disrupt for the sake of disrupting. He has never failed to provide solutions that are grounded in pragmatism and in how things ought to be. Out of the dozens of books Bill has written, I chose to center my introduction on academic outlaws, queer theory, and cultural studies in the academy that was published in 1997 because it is my favorite one of his books and because it holds many meanings for me, and I expect that it also holds great meaning for Bill. Bill has always written in a very personal, conversational, and self-assured style. And Outlaws exemplifies the non-traditional style that Bill uses as his academic voice. The book combines empiricism with fiction and with personal accounts as he recounts the Penn State fight that he led. It recounts the early days of AIDS when Bill and I shared the shock and sadness of the loss of our beloved colleague and friend, Bobby Wright. Those of you who read the LA Times, Inside Higher Education, the Chronicle of Higher Education, or listen to NPR, know that Bill has not been shy about critiquing higher education, and especially the transgressions of our own university. But Bill is no armchair academic complainer. The reason why I love Academic Outlaws, besides its in-your-face title and romantic photo, is at the last one-third of the book, which I can best describe as a manual for the academic tactician on how to deploy the power of knowledge and theory to be an authentic and action-oriented change agent. But there are more personal reasons for my choosing Academic Outlaws as a centerpiece of this introduction. The photo on the cover page, which was absolutely not the kind of cover page of books of that genre or era, is particularly meaningful to me. It is a photo of Bill and Barry taken by my husband, Agapito Diaz, in the summer of 1993, before Bill and Barry went off on sabbatical to Costa Rica. The photo was taken in Stockbridge, Massachusetts, as Bill, Barry, Dave Corey, Bill's longtime friend going back to high school, and me were buying provisions to take with us for an outdoor picnic at a concert in Tanglewood. The photo reflects the happiness, security, passion, and love that Bill has been so fortunate to have with Barry for so many years. Indeed, in the dedication to Outlaws, Bill wrote, "For Barry Weiss, without whose love and friendship I would have completed this 6 months sooner." Warriors, outlaws, and transformative leaders have the power to inspire, but they're not always good at building. This was not the case with Bill, the center to which Bill has dedicated more than 20 years of creativity, fundraising, sweat and tears, and which is named in honor of the bequest made by Earl and Pauline Pullias, is now ranked among the top 10 research centers in higher education. Yet, when Bill came to USC, the higher education program was essentially non-existent. If there would have been rankings of higher education programs then, USC's would have been at the very bottom. In coming to USC, Bill seized on the opportunity to build a center that would engage in research and practice to give voice to silenced lives, within and outside the academy. The Pullias Center has attracted millions of dollars from grants makers. It has advanced higher education research on many fronts. It has attracted national and international visitors, and it has housed postdoctorate fellows who have gone on to make their own marks in higher education, among them James Minor, who is somewhere here. As I stand here about to introduce him, it is somewhat dizzying for me to try to capture for you the scope of Bill's work and influence over these many years. And so I will return to what I remember as being the very first description I ever heard about Bill. It was in a note from Ellen Chaffee in which she commented on a paper he wrote in 1987. And she said something to the effect that he was, as usual, being a maverick. And he's still that, a true change agent and an academic warrior. Traditionally, when warriors make their entrance, they are greeted with rousing cheers. So please, let us rise and join me in thanking Bill for changing higher education and for changing all of us.
Okay. I feel like I should say, let's have lunch. but I've got you here. I could go on and on about thanking so many different people here, so I will do that individually so I can get us moving. And permit me, in this valedictory of sorts, to offer a moment of personal history. My ancestors came from Ireland. I am third generation. To paraphrase President Trump, Ireland at the time did not send its best. If by that we mean college-educated or fluent speakers of English. Ireland had been under the occupation of the English for 7 centuries. Patrick Tierney and his soon-to-be wife, Catherine, left for America in 1848. They left like so many others in Ireland because they were starving. In Ireland, there were 1.5 billion flourishing crops. Imagine that: corn, wheat, barley, and oats. But the British exported everything. The Irish were left with potatoes, and the blight killed them off. The potato famine. 1 million Irish Catholics starved to death. 2 million left. Another 500,000 died in aptly named coffin ships. More than 25% of the travelers died during the 10-week journey on Patrick and Catherine's ship. The ship was quarantined and then denied entry into New York Harbor. The ship tried to land in Philadelphia and then Baltimore. No Irish luck. Finally, the captain offloaded the surviving passengers illegally near Norfolk, Virginia, by having them wait ashore at night. They arrived in a foreign country having English as a weak second language, with no friends or relations, 400 miles away from their expected destination. Patrick was 18 years old and Catherine was 19. I wonder what it was like to arrive in a country with nothing but wet clothes and a bag that Patrick carried. They arrived with 2 things. First, faith, a product of a Catholic upbringing that a better world awaited them. And second, a belief in liberty. This trip across the ocean was to flee famine, to flee impoverishment, for the belief that there was a country where they could live free. So the Tierneys arrived in 1848. Welcome to America. So when someone says a country does not send its best, I not only find that intellectually repugnant and morally reprehensible, but I also find it personally offensive. 12 years later, Patrick and Catherine appeared in the Virginia 1860 census, with Patrick listed as a laborer. They had 3 children. 2 others died in infancy and are buried in a cemetery in Henrico County near Richmond, Virginia. As the Civil War broke out, we find Patrick saying he could not live in a land where whites treated blacks the way the English treated the Irish. He, Catherine, and the 3 children walked and sometimes rode hay wagons the 400 miles from Richmond to New York. Patrick and one of his sons, John, were stonemasons. They worked on the double-arched stone towers of the Brooklyn Bridge. I was born in New York. My mother, who had pretensions of what we like to say was lace Irish, when we drove over the bridge would say that your ancestors built this bridge, and she was implying that they were the architects. No, they were the fellows who were hanging from the scaffolding, putting stone on top of stone. 27 died. It was good enough to earn a living. In 1883, the largest suspension bridge in the world opened. My father was the first in his family to go to college, first Fordham and then St. John's. My mom also attended Fordham, but the downtown branch, since the main university didn't admit women. Her parents had only graduated from the 6th grade, and my mom had a head for math, something that her youngest son did not inherit. By high school, she was doing the bills in the family. When she got to Fordham, she wanted to major in math. But as you know, girls are not good in math. So they turned her down. She persisted. They admitted her as a math major, and they gave her a seat in the back. She was the only girl in a class of 27. Grading consisted of a midterm and a final, and all you did was put your last name on the exam. On the first midterm, the professor said some exams were horrible and failed, most were B's, and there was only one above 90. Who was Nolan? My mother shyly raised her hand. The professor told her to come to sit in the front of the room, and she graduated with honors and the resentment of the boys. Now, lest I heroicize my family, I should point out that when my two uncles returned from World War I, Uncle Joe had what we would call today post-traumatic stress syndrome, and he spent the rest of his life confined in the attic in the upstairs family house. Uncle Frank had the gall to fall in love with a German American. Even though she was Catholic, the family disowned him and never spoke to him again. My oldest cousin Guy, in the 1960s, married an Italian Catholic. He was not disowned, but no one attended his wedding, and he was no longer invited to family gatherings. You can imagine my parents' joy when they learned that I was in love with a Hungarian who was Jewish and a fella. I raise this personal history as a way to enter into a conversation with you about a book I am writing on higher education for democracy. I don't think all social science research needs to have the investigator reveal their histories, but it's a mistake when we overlook or try to mask our standpoints. Now, this is a photo from 3 years ago when I had a Fulbright in India. Jingmat, our 26-year-old Buddhist philosopher guide, got us to the top of a 17,500-foot mountain range in the Himalayas. We trekked for a week in the Marca Valley. We talked about topics big and small. I got to asking Jingmat every morning as we started trekking after breakfast, Jingmat, what is the meaning of life? He eventually warmed up to American irony from a professor, and he would say, William, this is the meaning of life. A road. We take a journey that we cannot control, but we can influence. I thought a great deal on that trek about the future. I realized I wanted to move on at some point and not become Old Bill. This is the elevator in the Wade Phillips Hall I've used for 25 years. I didn't want to be the guy who got off the elevator and those who were still on the elevator would say, that's Old Bill. He used to write a lot. I decided I wanted to work a few more years and have fun doing it, intellectual fun. I mostly stopped writing articles. I pretty much stopped going to meetings. I decided to do 4 fun things. Sunil Kalori and I, soon to be Dr. Kalori, arrived at the same conclusion about ideas pertaining to cultural and social capital. However helpful Pierre Bourdieu's work was, it left us at an intellectual dead end in a cultural straitjacket with no agency. We did a directed reading on relational sociology. Then we taught a seminar. Then we put together a marvelous collection of authors for a book that is in press. If you want to have fun, work with someone who's smarter than you, has boundless energy, a way with words, and is as intellectually curious as you. Michael Lanford, a postdoctoral scholar in the Pullias Center and en route to a faculty position, and I have been writing about innovation in higher education for the last half-decade. We agree that higher education has to change, has to be more innovative. But what most of what we read when authors make that claim is to trash everything. Tenure has to go, shared governance has to go, academic freedom is irrelevant. We don't believe that. We traded ideas for 18 months and have a book coming out on what we're calling mindful innovation. Fun task number 2 is to co-author a book with a Renaissance man who is likely to make a reference to Messiaen or Stravinsky that has me scurrying to Google to find out what the hell he meant. And the book is stronger because we wrote it together. Now, I'm not sure if you know Peter Singer. He's an animal rights philosopher at Princeton. A few years ago, he wrote this book of short, provocative essays on philosophy. Each one made me think. He didn't really care that I was convinced. He wanted to enter into a dialogue with me. And I thought that we needed a book like this in higher education. A year ago, I spent 3 days a week for a semester writing 5-page essays on all sorts of topics, big and small. Then I rewrote them. Then I sent them to an editor with a PhD in English who is half my age, with twice my writing skills, brutal editing. And it's ended in a better book that is out the door to the publisher. A third form of fun is writing by yourself, puzzling out what you think and how to say it. Now, I could use my time here today to go over my greatest hits, but I'd rather not look back and instead look forward to what I have been involved in researching and have just started writing. Think of this as a qualifying exam, and you're the committee, a large one at that. Now, when I came home from India, something happened which gave rise to the need for this book. The election of Donald Trump forced me to think about not only what my reaction should be, but what about the university? I have been impressed by the actions of the news media. Outlets like the New York Times seem to be trying to separate fact from alternative facts and to fight against public figures who claim that truth isn't truth. I am less comfortable with our universities. I know that individuals, and some in this room, have done marvelous work. As institutions, universities, however, I don't think have been so great. Universities are not neutral grounds. We have the potential and the responsibility to foment democracy. We need to place our universities in a larger environment rather than assume that they are self-encapsulated. These attacks on democracy are not just happening here, but throughout the world. We are in the midst of a democratic recession. My project focuses on 3 cities: Los Angeles, New Delhi, and Hong Kong. I had a visiting fellowship at the University of Hong Kong for 3 years and returned there in the fall for a month. I had a Fulbright in India for a year and then just came back last week on a very long plane ride. Now, since World War II, the United States has arguably built the most effective system of higher education in the world, and California, with its master plan, has stood as the exemplar for public support of universal access. Los Angeles is the epicenter of many of the problems and challenges we face. The combination of privatization, declining state financing of higher ed, the casualization of academic labor has created questions about higher education's purpose and how do we make it work. With 1.2 billion people, India is the world's largest democracy. India's higher education system is beset by challenges over funding, regulation, and lack of opportunity for its poorest citizens. India's reservation system, similar to affirmative action, rapid increase in privatization, corruption, and intrusion on campus activities has raised significant questions about the purpose of higher education. Hong Kong has Asia's best universities and a tradition of research excellence. The grassroots movement, Occupy Central, demanded greater democratic participation for the island. The movement was started by university professors and carried out by students. Hong Kong's current relationship with China is complicated by its colonial past, and the role of the universities in shaping public opinion has become a point of conversation. Now, you might think that Delhi's size makes it so different from Hong Kong, or that Los Angeles has nothing in common with either city, so comparisons are impossible. But all 3 cities have histories of democratic engagement. There are shared assumptions about what is expected of higher education. Education has been seen as a liberalizing force and a route out of poverty. Now, I'm going to save the 100 pages of data from the city, so we're not here until dinner, just lunch. But I'll give you a taste of what I'm thinking and why I'm thinking about universities in a particular fashion. My guiding assumption is that the forces of globalization and neoliberalism have raised significant questions about the nature of higher education. Now, let me offer just 2 paragraphs on how to think about globalization and then neoliberalism. Globalization snuck up on us and it changed everything, everywhere. It might be different in LA than Delhi, but how globalization has impacted how entrepreneurs do business in Los Angeles also impacts how the poorest people live in New Delhi. At one point, we might have meant globalization as a synonym for American capitalism, but that's not where we're at today. Think about how culture, technology, politics, and the market interact to create new relationships that impact society. Over the last 30 years, the neoliberal assumption has been that the public sphere should shrink. This is a pretty standard Republican premise. Market principles from the private sector should be applied to public and nonprofit institutions. The less government intrusion, the better. Outcomes matter, and if something can't be measured, then it's unimportant. The implication for universities is clear. The worth of a poem cannot be monetized, so it is less value. The value of a student meeting with a professor after class to engage in thoughtful discussions about an issue raised in class can't be precisely calculated. Because these activities cannot be measured, the fear is that they are of little worth. The involvement of a faculty member in the governance of the institution is a waste of time when compared to the colleague who generates external grants. Faculty have to be assessed. Part-time faculty are cheaper than full-time. Why not outsource all work that can be done more cheaply? What are the implications for the university now that we are in such an environment of globalization and neoliberalism? I think we are facing 3 crises. Based on my work in Los Angeles, Delhi, and Hong Kong, I've come to see that what I'm calling these are crises of identity. And what they are is hegemony, legitimacy, and autonomy. And I'll speak briefly on these. These are crises to me that go to the heart and the purpose of academic life. And I'm arguing that those of us in colleges and universities need to focus on a scholarship and pedagogy of commitment, rather than try to remove ourselves from society or portray the university as a fortress immune from the pedestrian concerns of academic life. My effort here is to get our universities to be centrally concerned with advancing democracy. I'm trying to theorize the university in a manner that moves us away from a false neutrality of disinterestedness. The university helped build the modern nation state. We trained elites and an increasingly broad middle class. The university made the case for the democratic project. The faculty in Hong Kong, for example, played a central role in putting forward a modern conception of Hong Kong. Hong Kong was one of the first global cities in Asia. In August of 1947, Nehru gave his thrilling independence speech for the world's newest democracy, and I really encourage you to listen to it on YouTube. It really is something. Part of what he says is, long years ago, we made a tryst with destiny, and now the time comes when we shall redeem our pledge. At the stroke of the midnight hour when the world sleeps, India will awake to life and freedom. At the birth of independent India, Nehru wanted universities to educate the mass of society and achieve scientific excellence, none more so than those universities in the nation's young capital of New Delhi. A century ago, a stance of disinterestedness enabled the university to comment on the social mores of society and, through a belief in objective research, bring about change. The democratic state encouraged universities to have an objective distance from society in order to analyze and improve that society. However, that distance and disinterestedness, in my mind, is no longer sufficient in a world where we are facing a democratic recession. Max Weber's famous adage that intellectuals need to put forward and ethics of responsibility, walked a fine line between objective science and delineating the implications of a decision. Weber never anticipated the implications of a neoliberal global environment where news and information is instantaneous. Today, an ethics of responsibility has to take into account the rise of the populist movement and how individuals disseminate information. What might we do to restore the university's voice and in turn reverse the democratic recession? Now, the first crisis pertains to its intellectual role. The university once had intellectual hegemony. And by hegemony, I mean universities had the ability to define knowledge. Throughout the 20th century, the battle about higher education had to do with the production of high culture and the meaning of science. The university was the arbiter of knowledge. Many of us came to critique that because of its racist, sexist, or biases. And those who were positivists and trained in science, however, went about their work. Those of us from a postmodern perspective critiqued that stance. But we did it from the comfortable stance of a tenured faculty in universities. From either ideological persuasion, most faculty were tenured and free to go about their work without threat of losing their jobs. Eventually, what occurred, however, was what I'm calling a crisis of hegemony. Universities used to be the arbiter of knowledge, and they communicated that they no longer were able to define knowledge. And now we have a neoliberal framework of globalization which has its own problems with objectified expertise. All of a sudden, we have others making claims to knowledge. We use our own facts, said Kellyanne Conway. The second crisis pertains to how the larger society views the purpose of the university. Until the middle of the last century, the purpose of academic life was to create new knowledge and to train students. Training, however, was not vocational. Faculty did research and taught students. Regardless of discipline, they were trying to understand different phenomena and to train students to think. Faculty and their administrations assumed that if they trained students how to think, they would be better prepared to take up positions in society and contribute to society. The view of society until recently has as a central role involvement in democracy. Horace Mann said that in 1820, with common schools, Abraham Lincoln affirmed that with the creation of land-grant colleges during the Civil War. We did it again with the GI Bill. The assumption was that a literate person with reasonable scientific reasoning would be a benefit to society. Sure, individuals benefited because they found employment, but that was assumed. Post-World War II had a surfeit of jobs. Until the late 20th century, however, we did not think of universities as vocational centers. As the larger environment shifted, so has the purpose of the university. Citizens, governments, and students increasingly view higher education as a transport vehicle for jobs. If a university does not train students for gainful employment, the thinking goes, the university has failed. Such a shift has created the second crisis in higher education. When the university's raison d'etre shifts from what it has largely held for centuries to a vocational purpose, then the institution is facing a crisis of legitimacy. Now, this last point has to do with autonomy. The metaphor of the university as ivy covered painted a picture of a cloistered community removed from society. Shared governance suggested self-governance without interference from the state or other entities. Professors were the arbiters of knowledge. The problem was that the contradiction between the demand for autonomy and the growing pressure to hold universities to the same criteria of efficiency and efficiency and productivity that private enterprise faces. Now, my point is not that universities are the villains or enemies of capitalism. The rise and strength of American universities came about during the capitalist eras of the 19th and 20th centuries. Markets help in certain areas for universities to capitalize on investments and seek new ways to undertake activities. Surely technology has enabled all organizations, not just universities, to be more efficient. But these crises, however, have hit universities throughout the world. The result across geographic areas is that our post-secondary sector is ill-equipped to handle attacks on democracy. Now, you're not going to be able to see this slide very well, but I can send it to you because it's a pretty darn important one. We tend to have historical amnesia when we think about democracy, as if it's a system that has been firmly established and implemented throughout the world for a long period of time. We think the world is moving perhaps inexorably toward greater freedoms and more democracies. And by democracy, I mean a system in which all citizens are able to choose and replace their leaders in regular, fair, and meaningful elections. The liberal idea has been constructed around representative democracy, human rights, and a belief in human capital, complemented by a strong social safety net. But in 1974, only about 30% of the world's independent states met the criteria for electoral democracy, less than 50 countries around the world. Democracy then had an incredible 30-year growth spurt, which perhaps accounts for our amnesia. Now we have the opposite, and sometimes we fool ourselves that when democracy is overthrown, it's a military coup, and that's not the case. Occasionally it is. But we are seeing instead a populist surge around the world. Democracies are seen as failing individuals. Jobs are harder to come by. Interest-based politics minimize communitarian notions of the public good. Populist politicians win elections by attacking representative democracy. They argue that the government is too weak to protect hard-working native-born people from my ancestors. The borders of a country have become rallying cries to keep immigrants out and to suggest that foreign lands are dangerous areas marked by terrorism. Established democracies are giving way to illiberal forces driven by popular passions because of the economic forces resulting from globalization and neoliberalism. Populist leaders develop a cult of personality from the left and the right. Huey Long, Father Coughlin, George Wallace, our current president. Mr. Trump's statement at the Republican convention fits this version of populism. The populist leader can solve problems no one else can. We use our own facts to solve those problems. Modern democracy functions by way of liberal institutions, the legislature, the judiciary, a free press, and academe. These institutions serve as a check for those in power. The populace sees these sorts of institutions as roadblocks, as impediments. We need universities to develop a language of community that celebrates commonalities and honors differences. We need a respect for democratic agencies that put forward opinions that force us to question authority, but maintain respect for the integrity of the process. We need a language of public life that starts with the recognition of deep differences among us and builds faith in meaningful communication across lines of difference. We need the ability to comment on flaws in our systems without assuming everyone must agree on that. If we disagree, the end is war. We need to build what I said long ago as communities of difference. James Baldwin made the clearest rules for engagement when he said, we can disagree and still love each other unless your disagreement is rooted in my oppression and denial of humanity and right to exist. Baldwin is arguing here for a larger arena where disagreements might occur. We have room to debate climate change, for example, and by way of facts, we can defeat arguments that are spurious and ill-informed. Where we have to draw the line are those arguments that always have been with us, but now have taken a more public turn with the rise of social media and a particular strain of populism. Holocaust deniers always have been a microcosm of and a fringe element. Unfortunately, in the 21st century, The intellectual progeny of these individuals are able to generate a sizable following on numerous topics. Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States. He's a closeted Muslim. The children at Sandy Hook were not shot dead. The events didn't happen. Hillary Clinton read a pedophile ring right out of the basement of a pizza parlor. These are the sorts of issues that I'm not interested in allowing on our campuses in the mistaken idea that this is free speech and academic freedom. Academics need to be able to point out to what a good or a better society entails, and then discuss what that means for active citizenship in a democracy. We need to make the case outside the university to the broad public, and within it to our students and ourselves. Intellectuals in our nation's universities should represent the conscience of society. We shape the conditions under which future generations learn about themselves and their relation to others in the outside world. We are engaged in pedagogical practices that by their very nature are moral and political, rather than simply cost-effective and technical. Recognize the dualism we are involved in as academics. We engage the larger community with the challenges that confront society. We do not have the answers. We work with the university in trying to unsettle and equip students with the skills not simply to gain a job, but to become critical intellectuals. We speak not because we have the answers, but because we do not have the answers. With those questions, reflective conversations about the kind of society we want will occur. And from this, we build a better society. We reignite democracy's flame. This is the obligation of the intellectual, and it requires humility and courage. Now, I could go on and on. I am an academic, after all. But I'm going to pause here. I leave soon for an extended trip to Italy, where I have a few nice fellowships that will let me write. I'm sure Barry and I will have our fill of remarkable food and walk off the calories in the Dolomites. However, I will have a draft done, or I better have a draft done of this book in December as I formally head out the door of USC. Now, I would be remiss if I ended here and didn't comment on the recent challenges that USC has faced. Permit me to offer 3 final points about this past year, which actually are not about this past year. Point 1. A few years after I arrived at SC, a reporter for the LA Times called and asked me to comment on a scandal in the athletic department. I gave him a quote, and he asked if he should speak with anyone else, and I suggested a friend of mine who was vice president for academic affairs. I called Michael as a heads up and said, just to let you know, someone from the Times is going to call. And Michael went crazy. He said, have you cleared this with the president's office? Did you get the okay to speak to the Times? You just can't do that. He said, the provost is going to be really angry at you. Barely here 2 years, and I already had messed up. So I called the provost, told him what I had done, and I said, Michael says that I'm in trouble. And Lloyd laughed and he said, nope, you have academic freedom. You can say whatever you want. Do you want to know what I said? I asked. He said, nope, I look forward to reading it in the LA Times tomorrow. And he hung up. At that moment, I felt very proud to be a faculty member. Very proud to be a faculty member at USC. I hope you use your voice, that you don't stifle it, that you speak your mind. Point 2. About a decade later, President Sample called me into his office and said he wanted me to chair a very small committee. It had something to do with some celebration we were going to do, and it was important. He said I could structure the events however I wanted. I had complete authority. Go for it. I invited a keynote speaker, And I left a note with President Sample about who I invited as an FYI. The president's office called me back the next day and said the president couldn't have that speaker. I needed to find someone else. I emailed the president's office and I said I resigned as chair of the committee. I was disappointed and I was pissed off. I had a great relationship with the president and I respected him, but I guess I was wrong. Either I'm given leeway, the way he said, or I'm just a party planner. It was April and we saw one another at this or that event and we shook hands and we averted eyes. And I was bummed out. In June, I got a handwritten letter sent to my home. It was still when we wrote letters and sent them to your home. Dear Bill, he wrote, I should have called you. I made a mistake and I apologize. I don't want to make this as an excuse, but you know how busy I am at the end of the school year. I still think I was right, but I should not just have sent a peremptory message through an intermediary. But Bill, you need to recognize that this university is bigger than either you or me. We have to work together. We can't let egos get in the way. Our work here at this university is critical. I know you know that. At the end of the day, it's not about you. It's not about me. It's about what we can do to make this university a better institution for society. Bill, please call Ann so we can have lunch. Steve. Again, I felt very proud to be at SC. Any academic has to fight one's ego. I hope you remind yourself that you're involved in something important, something that can change the world. It's not about you. Point 3. A few years ago, some of you know, a young man who I was very close to unexpectedly died. Berhane Azage was the smartest person I ever met. He had a smile that lit up a room and an intellect really that dwarfed mine. He was my mentee at Manual Arts and then a friend. He zoomed through Stanford and on to a successful career. And although we saw one another in lots of places, it wasn't geography that tied us together. It was conversation. It was strange to some that an older middle-class gay white academic from Brooklyn who majored in literature and a black poor straight guy from Addis Ababa who majored in engineering could be so close, but we were. We challenged each other to think about the meaning of life, I think, and he really made me a better man. He died on a Saturday night, and when I sat with the family all through Sunday, I really couldn't speak. I was in so much grief. I knew, however, that when I got to school on Monday, I had to speak with Zoe. I knew you could not make it better. Who could? But I knew you'd understand. What's strange is when a tragedy happens, you still have to function, you still have to do stuff. I knew whatever Monica told me to do, sign this, go to that meeting, go here, go there, that I could trust you implicitly. We have gone through so much that at the lowest point in my life, I felt so fortunate that we worked together. This happened during those 2 minutes that I was associate dean and I chaired that day some sort of meeting. No jokes that day. We finished early. And I breezed through the agenda, and Kristen asked if you could talk with me. And we got to my office, and before the door was closed, whew, a flood, because you were here at the start. You understood what Brahane meant. You know, I often say that one of the fun things that I've done is to get to know people across campus that I haven't stayed cooped up in the building. Sometimes, however, you find the funnest people, the best people, just a floor away. As Associate Dean, I worked with Michael Chung. You sent me a Bible verse. In tragic times, all moments are heartbreaking. You have to figure out how to get through every time. And driving home was horrible. I couldn't listen to music, but the silence was overwhelming. And I said that Bible verse like a mantra, over and over and over. You got me home. I say all this because years from now, or decades from now, when you're on this side of the podium, I hope you remember that however nice this or that prize is, that you got this accolade or that grant or this person said something nice, that what really counts is the interactions and relationships that we create, foster, and nourish. So there you have it. We've gone from 1848 to today. I sometimes wonder what Patrick Tierney would think of all of this if he were standing here listening. You want to know what I think, do you? All that democracy stuff is fine enough. Catherine and I came here not just for a better life. But because we wanted to be able to speak our minds. And speak we did. We're Irish, of course, we spoke. I liked hearing about the family. You surprised me when you said Frank married a German and then a guy married an Italian. And you, a Hungarian and a Jewish fella. Now, I know you say Barry is the best-looking man this side of the River Liffey, and it would not be a life worth living without him. But let me ask you, with a name like Barry and all that red hair, are you sure he's not just a wee bit Irish? I don't know if I understood all the democracy stuff you were going on about. It seems to me the people here have an awful lot of privileges that me and Catherine didn't have coming ashore that night. It seems to me that education matters pretty much. But if you don't use it to make the world a better place for the next fella, then you're just wasting time. But you and me, we're the ones wasting time now. Look at that big fella over there. He keeps looking back for the food, wondering when the food's going to be served. You know, this talk is just like an Irish wake. You're the excuse so people can get to the food. Why don't we let the good people get some food, William? It's time to get off the bloody stage. Indeed it is. Thank you very much.
All right, with that warning about the food, I'm not going to take very much time here. But I did want to thank everyone for coming here to celebrate and honor Bill. This is such a wonderful turnout, and we're so grateful to have you here. And second, I wanted to thank Karen and Michael and Estella for their wonderful introductions. That was fantastic. And Bill, you got to look at me. I want to thank you for giving such a, I would call it meaningful talk. You know, when I thought about this talk, I knew it would be provocative and insightful because you always are, but that was such a meaningful talk that I know all of us will be thinking about for many years to come. And I can't wait to read the book, the many books. I have the selection of all the many Bill Tierney books that I read and get so much out of. So thank you for that opportunity. But before we move into lunch, I also wanted to just say a few words to Bill, just a few, and a little bit about the future of the Pullias Center. And as you can see from the introductions and the talk, I have huge shoes to fill. Bill's contributions, as you heard, to USC, to Rossier, and to the field of higher education are beyond comparison. He's created a really lasting legacy that will shape future scholars and students and leaders worldwide. And the large audience here today that flew from all over the country is a testament to his impact. A highlight of my career has been co-directing the center with Bill. Thank you very much, Bill, for the time we've gotten to share together. And I'm really humbled and excited about assuming the role of sole director of the Pullias Center and to lead what we have as an amazing team of scholars that includes Tatiana Melgizo, Zoe Corwin, who you've heard about, Julie Pasalt, John Slaughter, Darnell Cole, and Shafika Ahmadi, plus an amazing team of postdocs and graduate students. And we're really excited that Adrian Huerta has joined us as a new faculty member starting this fall. So our team is growing. His research on men of color is important and really needed. And I also want to mention that we're really proud of Julie Pasalt, who just received tenure and who has received both the ASH and AERA Early Career Awards for her important work on equity, focused on admissions and graduate education. So clearly, with these individuals, the center's future is looking very bright. Moving forward, we're going to expand on all of our really important prior work that has defined the center, including a focus on student access and success among first-generation, low-income, and racially minoritized students that has so long marked the important work of the center. We're also going to continue to focus on scalable and innovative solutions, and Bill brought that up in his talk as one of the things he's long thought about, and continue to have a really strong research practitioner policy focus, and to do systemic work that looks at the national, state, and local levels. And given our location, we're going to continue to make California and Los Angeles a special focus of our work. As we move forward, I plan to take the center in just a few new directions that are aimed at transformational and scaled changes for student success in 3 areas that I think are really underlooked at in higher education, looking at more of the core of teaching and learning, leadership, and technology. And so one example will demonstrate some of our new area of focus that really builds on work that we're doing. So we're going to extend our work, as I mentioned, on teaching and learning. And we pioneered this work through the Delphi project on the changing faculty and student success, which has helped to build a more supportive classroom environment for students from diverse backgrounds by really supporting adjunct, as Bill was mentioning in his talk, faculty that have grown in such large numbers in higher education. Also, our work on remediation and introductory math under the leadership of Tatiana Melgizo has showcased how learning spaces matter very deeply to student success and shape equity in profound ways. And lastly, Julie Pasalt and I both identify ways to improve STEM education learning contexts, and Julie is also positively transforming graduate education. And in order to enhance our systemic work in this area, we're going to bring in new research affiliates that are going to work with us both on the national and state levels. And these national leaders will help us to increase our connections with policy and practice and help us to work systemically, taking our work out to campuses through and to networks and to policymakers. We're pleased to announce that Laurel Espinoza, who's with the American Council on Education, has agreed to already join us, and we have several other research affiliates that will be joining us in the next few months. We also want to strengthen our ties to our existing research associates and alumni. So after a 25-plus year history, we now have hundreds of alumni and scholars who are leaders in higher education, many of whom are here today. So we look forward to connecting the Pullias Center in ways that enhance our collective work. So we will be reaching out to many of you to develop and strengthen our connections. So we look forward to that collaborative work and publications. And to support these collaborations that I've been talking about, we're working to endow the William G. Tierney Futures Convening. And this legacy endowment gift will fund an annual convening to talk about the future trends in higher education. Bill has had, as you've heard, a significant impact on higher education as a result of all of his real forward thinking about incredible issues that the enterprise needs to grapple with. And he did it way before anybody was thinking about these issues. When he was thinking about college access that we now all talk about all the time, nobody else was doing this work. He's done incredible work on globalization and international issues way before anybody was doing that work. And his current work on technology and games is also very cutting edge. He's really been on the forefront of all of these critical topics. So this convening would be an opportunity to do strategic thinking and proactively engage these issues before they become a crisis, and do so in really innovative ways. So this convening would bring together a select group of highly regarded leaders in higher education to discuss the future issues that higher education scholars should be engaging. The day would include junior and emerging scholars as a way to train future scholars. As we've heard throughout the day, Bill has been a really well-respected mentor, and having a convening that honors meaningful intergenerational mentoring will continue his legacy. So Bill, you will be missed, but I know you will be there as a friend to Pullias, USC, and the higher education colleagues and field. We wish you all the best at this very significant juncture in your life. And now, enjoy your lunch, and please, I know you'll have great conversations about the ideas that Bill has presented to us. And again, thank you so much for being here to honor and celebrate